Good morning, everyone. This is Dana from NexGen, and it's been a while since I did a book review, and I thought that it would be appropriate with the Me Inc. series that I introduced to you a book that I read in 1996 that I think would explain a lot of things, and it will be beneficial to you as it was to me. This definitely was a game-changing book. So what I'd like to do is go over it with you and invite you to buy it or check it out from the library. I purchased the book, The Millionaire Next Door, in 1996, and the authors are Dr. Stanley and Dr. Danko. They did a revised edition before Dr. Stanley passed away in 2010, and I believe there was another book that was published by posthumously by Dr. Stanley in one of the Millionaire Next Door series. Now, this book has 7 factors that they found as the common denominator for the millionaires that they interviewed. So it was basically a series of interviews to find out what these millionaires had in common. So they had the 7 factors, and there's 8 chapters in the book and 3 appendices. Now, the 8 chapters are comprised of the 7 factors. These are the 7 factors, and each factor is a chapter in the book. Now, these factors have so much information that I'm going to go to each chapter and basically talk about what resonated with me. Now, when you read the book, what resonates with you may be different, but I think it's important to read the entire book more than once, because at each stage of your life, these things are going to come into play. Now, in summation, what I got out of the book was that wealth was not the same as income. And we've talked about that before in previous videos. And just because a person makes a good income and they spend all of that income, it doesn't make them wealthier. It just makes them consumers and living high. Wealth is what you accumulate, not what you spend. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the different chapters in the book. And wealth is more often the result of the lifestyle of hard work, perseverance, planning, and of course, self-discipline. When I purchased the book in 1996, it was a handbook. It was a smaller book. It was a little thick, and the print was a little difficult to read. The good news is you can check this book out from the library, or you can purchase it on the Kindle, and you can change the font. So that's the good news. In this chapter, they pretty much did a portrait or a prototype of the millionaires that they interviewed. And of course, it's not what people think, and that's what's really important. It's not what they have or anything that you can see, hence the millionaire next door. You don't know who they are. In this chapter, they defined wealth and what wealth means. And for the purposes of this book, wealth is getting more pleasure from owning substantial amounts of appreciable assets than from displaying a high consumption lifestyle, which was quite interesting. In this chapter, they talked about how you would determine if you were wealthy. So this was based on your age, whatever income you have, and that would determine what your net worth would be. And again, next Friday, we're going to be talking about how you would calculate your net worth. So what you would do is you would multiply your age times your realized pre-tax annual household income from all the sources except for any inheritance you may have, divided by 10. And again, this is less than any inheritance wealth, and that's what your net worth should be. So let's say that we calculate your net worth. So let's say that you are 40 years old and you make $100,000. So you would take the $100,000, multiply it times 40, and then divide it by 10. And that will get you $400,000. So the AAW that they talk about in the example is an average accumulator of wealth. So if your net worth is $400,000, then you are right where you're supposed to be as far as average. If it's below the $400,000, then you're what they call an under accumulator of wealth. And let's say that your net worth was $800,000 instead of $400,000, that you would be considered a prodigious accumulator of wealth. So those are the types of things that they're talking about in that chapter. Again, read it for yourself and you may see some other gems. Now, of course, in this chapter, we've heard this time and time again about living below your means. And in the previous Me Inc. series, we did the Wealth Case Study 4 with Mark and Carla. And if you remembered, they, on the gross, their combined family income was $290,000. And what they decided to do was to live off of one of their incomes, so that when they did their budget, it was based on the net of that one income. So that's how they were able to live well below their means. When I read this chapter, I was looking for ways to be more frugal, still get the things that I wanted, but put the suggestions that they had in this book into practice. And it actually worked out nicely. This is another good chapter, and it's basically reviewing what you're bringing in and spending time analyzing your spending and the income, and actually making that a priority, that you're using your resources efficiently and you're looking for ways to build wealth. And so Carla and Mark, they would go over their budget on a monthly basis, and Carla would actually be reviewing it every week. And so they actually had a goal. So they sat down and they planned, and they basically put everything out on the table and looked for ways to be efficient with their resources. What I learned from the book was, well, from this particular chapter, is the things that concerned those that were wealthy, which was very different from those that were not wealthy. So looking at what their concerns are and what was important to them and what they would apply their resources to. Now, this chapter I thought was pretty fun. And I remember when I was younger that people's status was pretty much based on what they drove or where they lived. So whatever you were driving, in this book, it basically highlighted whatever you're driving is not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of what you're doing, or the vehicle that you're purchasing. It's it's a functionality. It's not an extension of who you are as a person. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting was the difference between a new car and a used car when the vehicle is being sold by a dealer. So if you go to a dealership and you purchase the vehicle new, what new means is that the vehicle was not registered, which means it wasn't owned by anyone. So we had a situation where we went to purchase a vehicle. It was new. And when the gentleman backed out the vehicle in the showroom, he actually scraped the side of the vehicle. Now, even though he damaged the vehicle, that vehicle can be sold as new. So now we're in 2022. If I purchased a 2022 vehicle, and we all know that as soon as we drive the new vehicle off the lot, it depreciates in value. If a month later I bring the vehicle back and the dealer accepts it, they cannot sell the vehicle as new. They have to sell it as used or pre-owned. So it doesn't matter about the mileage, because I could have put less than 10 miles on it. It still would be sold as used. So I said all that to say that any vehicle that you purchase, make sure that you're using it for the function and not necessarily for the social status. That's what I got out of reading this chapter. This was a very important chapter, specifically when we're talking about generational wealth. This was a very good chapter for me, and it basically talked about how they treated their children and grandchildren with respect to economic help or anything of that nature. And so they actually looked at the top 10 occupation that the adult children of the affluent would have. So anything that the parents or the affluent parents would give the children is so to propel them to do better. So whether they're an entrepreneur, a physician, an attorney, an accountant, a teacher, or a professional, they are pretty much investing in their generational wealth. I kind of liked this chapter because it was basically talking about how the affluent would support their children and grandchildren economically. And if they did provide them with any economic infusion, it would pretty much come with strings. But the point of the generational wealth, is so that the children would actually do better or increase the family wealth. So that's why the children of the affluent have to be economically self-sufficient. Now, this chapter was pretty much the reason why my mentor encouraged me to purchase the book. So it's basically looking at occupations that would actually serve the affluent and the type of occupations that are needed. For example, attorneys, dentists. Well, not just any attorney. It would be an estate attorney, of course, a certified public accountant, dentists, plastic surgeons, those types of things. So this is a very important chapter. They're all important, but for those that want to market to the affluent, this is a good chapter to read. In this chapter, it pretty much talks about the types of sole proprietorships or businesses that the affluent would be involved in. And I'm telling you, these are things that are what I consider non-sexy types of work. Highway and street construction contractors, coal mining, drugstores, dental labs, bowling alleys. Well, in the 90s, in 1996, that was a big deal. Mobile home dealers. So these are things that are needed. So that, for me, that was the most important thing. It wasn't anything that was flashy. It was what was needed. And those are the types of businesses that these affluent people would get into. In the appendices, they were talking about how to find the millionaire, quote, millionaire next door. So it was pretty much saying they could be anywhere. And it's the people that value relationships and appreciating assets as opposed to being flashy. And then in Appendix 2, they talk about the 1996 motor vehicles. Keep in mind, that's when the book was written. So these may have changed, but maybe not by much. And what's really interesting is in 2010, when you had the revised edition, it was including what was going on in 2008. So what was really important is the number of millionaires actually increased. And then in Appendix 3, you're talking about, in alphabetical order, there's a list of businesses and occupation of the self-employed millionaires. So you have a list right there. And it's not too far off. So hopefully this information was beneficial to you. As I said before, next Friday we're going to be talking about how to calculate your net worth. So have a great week, and I will talk to you soon.
Make sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can never miss another video.